All right. Thanks to all of our speakers. And now we do have time. We do have time for some questions. Or we can obviously just sit quietly and eat cheese curds. It's always an option. But if anyone has any questions, raise your hand. We'll get a microphone to you. And for all of our speakers, I don't know if you're somewhere near the front, we can identify you quickly and get a speaker to you, or microphone to you.
My question is for the child care people. Once again, I thank you for your discussion of that. I think it's key in America today that we talk about mental health and how we're dealing with other people. So we could sit here all day talking about our level of mental health in this nation. So I'll limit my question to when you say child care, what is that classified as? Is it licensed, eligible for federal funding as a business expense?
Yeah, thanks for your question.
And then the second one is that when you say Vermont, are you talking Vermont? Are you talking southwestern Wisconsin? Those social demographics where mental health is definitely an issue. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your question. So first, just quick note. So the 3 study states were Vermont, Ohio, and Wisconsin. So we do mean the state of Vermont. Thanks for that clarifying point. But what we meant by child care was simply any type of informal child arrangement. So we use the term farm parent, although we realize that it may be grandparents, it may be other people who are involved in child care that aren't necessarily the biological parents. So in the study project, they mostly were talking to biological parents, but many times we were asking about, are you having, many people were saying, we have grandparents, or we chose to live here closer to these people. So relying on often an informal network, so not necessarily measuring these formal accredited options in the state or where the study state is. The only time we were very specific with the definition of childcare is measuring the availability with the childcare deserts, which measures the accredited, approved formal childcare opportunity. So it's almost an informal network, either parents, friends, that type of thing that people are using in the study. So I hope that clarified a little bit. Thank you.
We have one over here. All right. My question is about climate change. So it's to Dr. Chen. So in your talk you mentioned about the modeling work and you changed the vegetation productivity. So I'm really curious about in your modeling is like the vegetation productivity, what it is, and because we talk about so many different cropping systems, so many different landscapes. Do you have any specifics on that? Thank you.
Oh, yes, that's a great question. So as an integrated system model, GCAM is a very complicated modeling system. It includes the simulations of vegetation productivity, including forest productivity, biomass, the wood production, the crop production in terms of crop yield, all kinds of crops that you can think about in it. So yeah, you can think about if we change the productivity of those forest crops and grass, including fodder grass. So you can think about it in terms of if demand is certain, we don't change our demand. If the per unit area productivity is changing or higher or lower, we probably need less or more land for those type of vegetation. So those land we'll consider that land as resources that can be used for other sectors, for example, the bioenergy sectors, right? So we can put bioenergy crops onto this land, and we can use this land for dairy industry. We can, and maybe some other solar panels, those type of things. So yeah, that's kind of a mechanism underlying the linkage between vegetation productivity and other sectors. But again, those results still kind of miserable. We're still trying to understand it. Yeah, maybe Hamid has a better understanding of that. We can stop at the poster and discuss about that. Thanks.
Other questions? And then you talk.
So I have a question for the last speaker. You made a comment when you brought up the slide that when you went to touch them, that they were the ones that you had gradually taken off was more likely to act against it, right? Like maybe you thought that was a pain receptor. I just want to know, what would be your thoughts if they have been abruptly dried off? They probably want to be milked, right? And so touching them may have been like, ooh, I'm going to be milked to be relief of the pain, as opposed to considering it as a, like it's, you know, does that make sense? I don't know where she went. She's right there.
So your question is that they might want to get milked more?
Yeah, you know, like if they're being abruptly taken off, right? And then all of a sudden you touch them, you're like, oh, maybe I'm about to be milked again, so I can relieve that pain, as opposed to those that have been gradually taken off. They're done, right? Like they're good with not being touched. And so maybe it wasn't necessarily...
Yeah. So there's two things I want to touch on with that. The first is I have another study going on in addition to this that's a voluntary sort of dry off, and I'll be really curious to see, you said they're done. I'm not convinced our gradual dry off cows are done when we're drying them off. So I'll be curious to see that they're done conversation. But when we palpate into the udder, we push in those 4 spots with our 2 fingers, and we're evaluating a pain response. So those cows, they're secured in a chute when we do this, so they kind of either jump forward or they rock on their feet. Part of that is, right now, we had some hiccups when we enrolled cows, so our treatments aren't necessarily balanced perfectly, and it could be that my 6 cows that are in the gradual dry-off treatment are just more flighty. They're a little bit harder to get in the chute. They're not as used to human interaction. That's what I think is going on, but I'll be very curious to see if that trend continues now that we have more cows getting enrolled.
Two quick questions for the ladies from Platteville that are studying the gender discrepancy. First question is, where have all the males gone? The second one is, do you think in time, like a generation or 2 generations from now, that you'll see an upsurge in males or females from Central and South American descent?
First question. Hello. Okay. First question is that's what we're working on. That's our next step post survey and focus groups is to reach out to those that aren't in the education realm, right? Because why are we not seeing them? We don't know. We talk about it on a weekly basis, where they're coming from. But also we need to think about, I think, 2-year trade schools, those sorts of things are essential to everyday productivity in the world, and we need them just as much as we need educated for your students, right? Second, as far as other nationalities and other locations, yes, there could potentially be that, but I am of the mind that I honestly probably see more students trending towards technical careers, things like that, versus the 4-year universities. That's just personal. I don't know if that is going to trend that way, but everybody can use more students. So, thank you.
Hi, my name is Mitch. I'm a student here at UW Madison. I had a question for Dr. Lewis real quick, kind of conceptualizing the idea of the production costs of lactose-free ice cream and normal ice cream. If I had a cup of ice cream and it cost me $1 to make an arbitrary amount, how much would the equivalent lactose-free ice cream cost? Just a general guess is fine. I know that money kind of runs the world of the dessert market, so it seems like an important thing to conceptualize.
Yeah, so I think Chuck can follow up on this if I say something totally incorrect. But right now, the major companies making, and I'll stand up, the lactose-free ice cream, they are not selling them currently at a higher market value, although they cost more to produce, right? So we're seeing if consumers are willing to pay a little bit more, and if so, that might be able to pull a little bit more of an initiative to make lactose-free products, right? Because it does cost more, and it takes more time and stuff like that. So right now, they're sold at the same price, but we're seeing if we can help processors in that way. Does that answer your question? Oof. Yeah, I think at the end of our research, we will be able to answer that. And that's an awful answer, right? But, I mean, we looked at 2 different temperatures, or we looked at more than that. We looked at a bunch of different temperatures. The enzyme works faster at a certain temperature. We have to evaluate those specific kinetic rates and say, okay, if we apply them to ice cream manufacture, and there are more factors that play into that, ice cream mix has to be aged anyway at a cold temperature for some amount of time. So there's some amount that's like, okay, if you add the enzyme in at that time, can you just do that instead? So there's a lot of factors to consider, and we're at the initial steps, and we're having the consumers fill out these surveys. Chuck, do you have anything to add? Where'd he go? Of course, when I need him, right? Yeah, he's gone. But no, it's a great question. But I literally think right now that's our end goal is we want to be able to tell producers like or processors, you can sell at this higher market value and get more out of it. So, and say how much more you spend on it as well. Thanks for the question.
Sticking with Dr. Lewis, what's the difference between what you do and the people that are going down the A2 path? Are they similar, different, competitors?
Yeah, so it's very, very different. And that's something I think a lot of what the Dairy Innovation Hub does is we're trying to teach people, consumers as well as processors, what these differences are. So A2 is specifically a difference in proteins, whereas lactose is milk sugar. So A2 is looking at specifically beta-casein, one of the caseins, a single difference in amino acid, and does that cause different effects in the gastrointestinal tract? Whereas lactose intolerance is a totally separate issue. A2 milk is still being investigated, and whether or not it actually causes these gastrointestinal side effects. And it's a market area, but then also they're showing that A2 milk has worse coagulation properties for cheese manufacture and stuff. So a lot of ongoing research there, but they're not competing at all. Lactose intolerance is a very different issue that we know harms 65% of the world's population. And interestingly, these areas that are lactose intolerant or really high in lactose intolerance also have calcium deficiencies and things like that go along with it. So it's a major area, and what I want to get out is you have options if you're lactose intolerant.
Here. One more question on lactose. Here on your right here. Well, so, yeah.
Over there.
So do you need to measure how much lactose you have to see how much lactase you are going to put? And is there any downside of having too much leftover lactase?
So lactase will keep working. How much you add is more going to change the rate of how quickly you are now lactose free, I guess, if that's a good way to word it. So how much you add, if you add more initially, you're going to get to that lactose free stage faster. But if you add less, it'll get there just at a more gradual time. So concentration of enzymes, something else we have to consider when we evaluate the cost of production. Negative effects of adding too much, it's going to be mostly cost-based, I would say. Yeah, I think that answers your question.
And another switch to not on lactose anymore. So with the survey on where the students go, just to understand a little bit better, when you say agriculture, when they went to agriculture, are we saying working directly in farms or like cheese makers or cheese seller would be agriculture, or so where is the...
Yeah, it could be any of those. We were very broad in that, and we gave them several categories to select from. Industry being nutritionists, reproduction, genetics, any of those areas, dairy production, farms, cheese makers, those sorts of things. We were very broad. Nobody reached out and asked us, hey, does this fit? And if they did have questions, that was likely the other category, that they didn't feel they fell under any of the others. Thank you.
And with that, I think we're going to shut it down for lunch, but help me thank all of our speakers one more time.